Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, depending on where you're connecting from. Welcome to yet another Citrix Ready webinar in the Citrix Ready Technical Webinar series, where we showcase how Citrix and our partners like SecurEnvoy have integrated to deliver valuable products and solutions to common problems faced by our customers. I'm Anil Kumar. I'm a technical marketing manager in the Citrix Ready program, managing network ecosystem of partners. We have SecurEnvoy with us today, and we'll see how SecurEnvoy helps our customers and also our mutual customers stop the data breach. And they'll also highlight how the weak link in terms of identity and access management is the end user itself, and they'll throw in some light on how to stop those data breaches. To do that, along with me, I have our main speakers. We have Doug Chase. He's the VP for Americas. John Dubé, he's the Director of Americas, and Michael Arguero, he's the Director of Engineering. I'll let them introduce themselves right after I talk a little bit about Citrix Ready program itself. All right, so Citrix Ready is an partner program where we showcase and recommend third-party products, solutions, services that demonstrate compatibility with Citrix's products. The main idea of the program is to showcase third-party products which have proven the compatibility with Citrix's products, and we have all the products, all the compatible products kind of published in our Citrix Ready marketplace. So customers can quickly and easily find solutions which fit into their environment, and it obviously has the proven tag of being compatible and ready with Citrix's products. So if you'd like to visit the Citrix Ready marketplace and also like to know more about the Citrix Ready program, below are the links. We'll be sharing the links to you over an email. So with that said, we are very proud to have SecurEnvoy here with us. They've been our partners for a really long time, and they've recently upgraded their membership to the premier level. They've also participated in the identity and access management program, which the details of which will be shared in a few days. So without any further ado, let me hand it over to John. Just one housekeeping item to keep in mind. If you have any questions during the webinar, please use the question panel in your GoToWebinar control panel. We'll take up the questions right after the presentation and the demo. All right, so all right. I'll hand it over to John now to take it over.
Okay, thanks, Anil. Yes, and like Anil said, my name is John Dubé. I'm Director of the Americas, and I work closely with Citrix. We are honored to be part of their Citrix Ready Premier Identity Management Program. We like he said, we've been working with Citrix for a long time. We have a great partnership. We have a nice integration with NetScaler. And I'm basically going to introduce you to Doug Chase. He's our VP of Americas. He's going to do a nice overview on Citrix Envoy, and then Mike Ugero is our Director of Engineering. He's going to do a little demo at the end, kind of covering some of the integration and how we authenticate, how our solution works in conjunction with Citrix. And we're just happy to be here and thank everybody for their time. So Doug, I'm going to switch it over to you if you want to kind of proceed with the presentation.
No problem. Thanks, John. And yeah, it's absolutely a pleasure to be able to present to the Citrix Ready team and the attendees. Our organization has lots of ex-Citrites in them. I've spent actually 7 years at Citrix myself. Our Director of Engineering, Mike Ajero, has about 25 going on 30 years of Citrix experience at pretty much every level of certification. So we're very excited to be able to introduce this technology to you folks. So just a little bit about SecurEnvoy. So who are we? We were founded in 2003 in the United Kingdom. Our founder, Andy Kemshall, actually patented when he was working at RSA the concept of tokenless two-factor authentication. So two-factor authentication and multi-factor authentication is not mystery technology. You know, for those on the call, we all know about the tokens. I certainly had them, and Andy had decided that there might be a better way. So rather than having people wandering around with tokens that get lost or washed, among other things, let's just go ahead and send an SMS text message instead, you know, with something they own. That took off, and we evolved as an organization considerably. We are a Citrix Ready Premier Partner for the upcoming Identity Access Management profile for these folks. And so we're very excited to be early on in this. I think it's a much needed compartment for the Citrix Ready program, and we're pretty happy to be Premier Partners of this. We do have best-in-class integration with Citrix NetScaler. We were presenting at Citrix Synergy, where we were gold partners, and just anecdotally speaking, when organizations started to talk to us, NetScaler integration was a very hot topic, and it's something that we do particularly well, not the least of which with our technology, but also the folks that we have in place within SecurEnvoy that make sure that our integration is seamless and easy. Our U.S. headquarters is based in Lisle, Illinois. Thousands of customers globally, well over 100,000 end users using our product across 45 countries. Last year, we were purchased by the Shearwater Group, a publicly traded organization on the London Stock Exchange, and that has allowed for a significant investment in our technology and the people and specific innovations as we start to move the ball forward, not only with identity access management, but you know, into other things as well. So when we talk about multi-factor authentication in general, you know, once again, not a mystery technology. It's been around for quite some time, but there are some facts that I think illustrate how important this technology is to an organization. So for instance, 81% of all data breaches are caused by hacking weak passwords. 75% of these are perpetrated by people outside the organization. Certainly financial institutions, not surprisingly, are the hardest hit by these, followed by healthcare, public sector, retail, and hospitality. For financial institutions, that's where the money is. The reason healthcare gets hacked as much as it does is because the sheer value of having a health record on the dark web is a critical, very critical component to be able to have a bad actor gain a lot of systems. And of course, we see a lot in the public sector, state, local, county governments, federal government, and then retail and hospitality, lots of credit card transactions. 73% were financially motivated. And I would have to probably say that other motivations would include intellectual property theft and just causing general damage. But clearly, this is a financially motivated activity. And the fact that 81% of all breaches are caused by these things means that this problem is going to continue. It's pervasive. And the good news is that there's some relatively easy solutions for it. So the title of this whole presentation, it's all about the end user. So why is it all about the user? Well, username and passwords are the lowest hanging fruit for a hacker. So if you are a hacker and you are looking to gain access into an organization, why would you try to plow through intrusion detection systems and VPNs and all the other perimeter security that's involved when I can simply get access to a username and password and get access to pretty much anything that I want to? Users, of course, have terrible passwords. I include myself among them. And the reason, of course, they're terrible is because they need something easy to remember. Users just want to be able to do their jobs. You know, they don't have security as top of mind, although it's getting a little bit better. But more often than not, the passwords are going to be easy to hack, and frankly, all the usernames and passwords that a hacker could want are already on the dark web for sale anyways, unless you have a really strong change policy about it. Strong change policies and complicated passwords encourage lots of calls to help desk. So when you start doing special characters and ampersands and exclamation points, they're easy to forget, number one, which requires password resets. And it lends itself to having those passwords written down in easy to find places. It's just very insecure. Users have all the access. So when we talk about a user, what are we talking about? We're talking about an employee. We're talking about a consumer. We're talking about anybody that has access into your systems, and that could be through a portal, that can be through an application, any number of ways for an end user to be able to get access into the systems. And that's by design, right? You want it to be, you want them to have access to these things. It's interesting. I did a little bit of a research a few days ago where I just Googled admin login. And when you Google admin login, it comes up with many, 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 many pages of various administrator login profiles, for web pages, none of which seem to be particularly well protected. Maybe some are. I would suspect that most aren't. Normal human behavior is easily exploited. So users just being users lend itself to being insecure. Once again, in the old days, and it's probably true today, is that people would be uploading things in the Dropbox, and they would basically be circumventing IT security controls because that's what users do. They want to make it easy for themselves. And so IT security has been trying to play catch up ever since in terms of trying to play whack-a-mole with user behavior. And then change is hard, right? So, an average user, when you disrupt their life with some sort of a new security procedure, productivity goes down, and you pray to God that the users actually follow these instructions through training and among other things. So it's getting better, but ultimately it boils down to the user and how do we make the user more secure. So calling a couple of companies out by name, I figured they're probably not on this call, but this has been in the news, as of recently. But Deloitte and Touche, suffered a catastrophic data breach. All the client information was easily accessed just through a single password from an administrator, right? So that was an easy to fix vulnerability that caused really catastrophic and widespread damage across Deloitte. Same thing with YouTube, the Vivo channels. Prominent account wasn't protected by 2FA. It allowed the hackers to guess the password or obtain it through social engineering attacks like phishing. These are all easy things, not to mention that there are just databases full of usernames and passwords. Eventually, someone's going to hit something. So Verizon has a data breach report that they put out every year, and I think this one is from 2017, but it's very similar in 2018. And here's kind of the takeaway: it's not if, but when you're going to get attacked. So there's no doubt, that an organization is going to be hacked. Not the least of which is because it's fairly easy to do. So you have bots running around looking for the lowest hanging fruit, and there is no low hanging fruit than a weak password system that's unprotected. So 1 in 4 organizations the global average of 28% is going to experience a data breach soon, with others, of course, on the way. Number 2, web applications are a huge gateway into your systems. This is true. So the web and the cloud, while have made it very easy from an infrastructure standpoint to be able to deploy applications and deploy assets for users and customers to be able to gain access to, it's just basically one big vulnerability. So, as an example, I have a car loan through Wells Fargo. When I go into Wells Fargo, I just simply enter in my username and my lousy password, although I'm trying to get better at it too, and I'm in the system. It doesn't challenge me for anything. And that's Wells Fargo Dealer Services. Now, Wells Fargo does have protection internally for employees, but we're starting to see many more projects now where they're starting to challenge, of course, the consumer, the end user, the member, for some sort of authentication to make sure that they are who they say they are. People will always remain a big cause of concern. It's all about the user. So it all begins and ends with the person. So if that person is using terrible passwords, or they click on a link that is that may be suspicious, it just starts the ball rolling. And then uncovering a breach can take months. So once an organization, or once a hacker actually gets into the new organization, they are there for quite some time. They're very good at covering their tracks. They are just collecting and collecting and collecting and collecting data before it's discovered. Once it's discovered, that starts the PR nightmare that is credit monitoring and brand damage. And I think they said on average, at least according to this report, that the average data breach costs about $3.5 million in damage, across the board, not including credit monitoring services and other things. It's a big deal. So what is multi-factor authentication? So everybody in this call, I'm sure, understands what multi-factor authentication is, but to reiterate, it's simply a way of adding another component to the login event that indisputably authenticates and verifies that the person who's logging in is who they say they are. So it's something you have and something you know. These components, while they sound easy in concept, and they actually are, frankly, it's shocking how few organizations actually deploy this. Obviously, it's growing. Multi-factor has been on stage for quite some time, but at the same time, I think people are still hung up on the token mode, where they have to carry something around with them that can get lost, this type, and what have you. Of course, it's getting better now. For instance, where I bank at Chase, I get sent a 6-digit token, when I want to log in to gain access to my bank account. It's getting better, but there's still an enormous amount of vulnerabilities out there where this is not being addressed. So happily for us, we have a strong solution for it, and there are some easy fixes. But the problem with single-factor authentication, it's easily compromised. We know this. Passwords are notoriously weak. We've noted this. And I decided to put up a little screen of the top 20 passwords of all time, which are predictably awful. Users reject 4-strong passwords. So when you, as an organization, when you try to impose strong password policies on your end users, generally speaking, it lasts for a little bit, but then you start getting called to help desk. You get complaints from executives. You get complaints from everybody, just because it's against human nature to overly complicate, where they want to expect immediate access into their systems, and you're hassling them, with complexity. And of course, the biggest problem is the single biggest target of all. So out of all of the potential ways that a hacker can gain access to your systems, poor password policies are more than 3/4 of that issue. And why wouldn't it be? So where is MFA being used? So clearly we see a lot of regulatory compliance type of conversations. So HIPAA, PCI, GDPR, CJIS, which is the Criminal Justice Information Systems. These regulatory compliances are in place for a reason, and two-factor authentication and multi-factor authentication are in place for a reason, because they know that the lack of it is one of the single biggest causes of data breaches. Of course, we see secure application, including web app access. So anywhere in an organization that somebody has a login event is a potential opening for a hacker to be able to gain access to the infrastructure. And the web access in particular is egregious, because if you think about the proliferation of cloud-based web access, it's everywhere. Third-party access. So when you have contractors and you have all these external people, remote users, branch offices, you have a lot of different variables where a hacker can exploit, and it's getting worse, especially with remote worker support. And of course, bring your own device, among other things. And just frankly, it's a best practice cybersecurity standard. So if you're looking at your organization and you're looking at best practices, multi-factor authentication has to be up there. It just has to be. Who's using this? Employees, business partners, customers, vendors, contractors. So one of the trends that we're seeing here as an organization is it's not just the I'll take a large healthcare organization for an example. Large healthcare organization, let's say they're using two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication for their physicians and nurses. But we're also seeing it, but that's generally speaking not how a system gets breached. A system may get breached by, say, a blood work lab that does business with that large hospital, and they're smaller and they're relatively unprotected. However, that lab does have access into the clinical systems within that larger healthcare organization. So all a hacker needs to do is gain access to that small lab, and now they have access into the clinical systems within that larger hospital. So we're starting to see, and that's not just hospitals; it's for a lot of different organizations. So we are seeing a trend towards these larger organizations imposing two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication standards on the organizations that they do business with, because it's a pretty easy point of entry, frankly. And of course, we do see a lot of contractors as well. So not just like the lab example that I gave, but also people that are coming in temporarily to have access to your systems that may not be as protected as you need them to be. And where are these occurring? So internal, we see a lot of branch offices, a lot of remote locations, a lot of work at home, all of these things. So, and anywhere that somebody has a login event into your system, once again, is a potential breach opportunity. So here's some use cases that, that are relatively common as it relates to multi-factor authentication. And some of these are a little bit left of center, but they're use cases that are worth considering. So, for instance, credit unions, we're involved in some projects with financial institutions where bad actors are pretending to be somebody else through a stolen record. They are answering the right questions to customer support. And then they're getting access into accounts to do whatever damage they want to do, transfer funds, download funds, whatever it is they want to do, pretending to be that person they can do. So what the financial institutions are considering, and some are and some aren't, but when somebody calls into that support line, the customer support system, will be able to send a secure code to that individual based on the profile that they have within their system to 100% verify that that person is who they're talking to. And so some risk assessments were done with some of these financial organizations, and they estimated that $10 to $15 million a year essentially was being stolen, through these breaches in customer support. Customer support can only do so much, so being able to challenge a member, for instance, to get an authentication code, becomes a very critical component of their cybersecurity strategy. I talked about the healthcare example with labs. Law firms need to protect their intellectual assets. So we obviously see a lot of law firms looking at this type of technology, because being able to gain access into a law firm's, LexisNexis or document system would be catastrophic. Absolutely. Retail needs to protect their access to customer data. Clearly, manufacturing needs to protect intellectual property and logistics. Education needs to protect students. Government needs to protect citizens' data and critical systems. So we've actually been involved in projects where local and county governments have requested our assistance, because when we talk about like the water department and the electrical grids and all of these type of really critical systems, if they don't have secure access to these, they won't be able to cause the type of damage that's going to be just catastrophic, for the citizens in general. So we're seeing a lot more use cases that are coming out of the woodwork that are a little bit, I would say, non-contemporary, but clearly important. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of an overview of how some other organizations are using this type of technology in sometimes unique ways that you may not traditionally think of 2FA for. So we like to put a sense of urgency around this. I'm not as so much of a MFA sales guy as I am an evangelist for this type of technology. Everybody on this call has had their information compromised. I think within 1 year, a couple of years ago, I had 4 institutions that sent me out credit monitoring reports, which I'll probably have for the rest of my life. Anthem, Blue Cross Blue Shield, eBay, LinkedIn, PayPal. All of these organizations have been breached. I would say 90% of them have been breached because of password access. So everyone on this call is affected by this. So, not only do I, obviously sell this type of technology, but I'm a big evangelist in terms of deployment. If you don't use our stuff, please at least use something. So what is the bottom line? So multi-factor authentication, just as a general concept, it dramatically improves security for very reasonable costs. Because this is not necessarily new technology, prices have come down considerably, particularly with a solution like ours. So you get a massive bang for the buck. It's very easy to cost justify. The ongoing costs aren't very much, and with the technology like Secure Access from SecurEnvoy, it's quite easy to administer. Excuse me. Multiple authentication methods to suit user needs. So when we're trying to deal with end users, we need to have as many ways as possible to be able to satisfy their authentication needs. So whether that be through sending an SMS text, having a voice call, being able to do a push notification to their phone, supporting YubiKeys, near field communications, you need to have as many ways as possible to be able to satisfy a very finicky end user corporation. And it doesn't have to be an all or nothing proposition as well. You can have some business groups that like push notification. With some credit unions that we've talked to, they have a older population who aren't running around with smartphones, so they need a different, easier way to be able to get access to that. Other people like holding a physical token in their hand to be able to authenticate in. So there are just multiple ways to do this now, and it makes it much easier for end user adoption. Of course, the unique one-time password for each transaction login, that unique one-time passcode is going to be critical in making sure that the individual that's accessing your systems are who they say they are. It can't be replicated and it can't be hacked. Significantly reduces identity theft, hacking, and phishing, all these people problems. So two-factor authentication solves a lot of problems under one umbrella. And that's why when it comes to hackers, they will generally bypass an organization that has this type of technology involved. Why would they try to go through something where the probability of them gaining access is zero, when it's just as easy to go to the next company where they don't have this type of protection? Once again, we're seeing a lot of third-party consultants, partners, and vendors. We're seeing larger organizations impose this type of technology on the people that they do business with. We're also seeing a lot of managed service providers and vendors that are using two-factor authentication and multi-factor as a security component they can actually market, right? It sends a message to their customers and their clients that they take cybersecurity and their data very seriously. And so we have seen a growth in organizations using this type of technology as a brand advantage, as a competitive advantage. Because if you're doing it and your competitor's not, what does that say about your competitor? Safer remote worker access. So, clearly with access to cloud infrastructures, web applications, all of these things, we see a lot more remote workers. And you cannot rely, and frankly, the remote worker access, a lot of these remote workers, you may not have control and probably don't over the type of environment that they have. So if they're not secure, on their PCs or the laptops or what have you, that provides an entry point. So at the very least, no matter how insecure your remote workers might be, you can ensure that if they're getting access into your systems, they're not doing it without uniquely identifying who they are. We talked about hackers moving on to easier targets, and then lower operational costs via less help desk calls. So what does this mean? So with two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, a password no longer really becomes relevant. Their password can be password, or it can be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It doesn't matter. Without that unique identifier, without that unique token that they receive access to in any myriad of different ways, they will not be able to gain access to the system. So, while passwords are still important, I think they're becoming less important, rightfully so, and falling away to more sophisticated, innovative authentication methods. So when you're choosing a vendor for this type of technology, here's a couple of considerations. Number one, the number of ways that a user can authenticate. So specifically with SecurEnvoy, we can do many, and this isn't even all of them. We just had to put it in the context of a nice screen. But we see push notifications being among the most common. We're still seeing SMS, which according to NIST is not the most secure way of doing things, but we still see it. We can do it through email. We can do it through voice calls. Once again, near field communications direct to the desktop. All of these different, what this says is that you are able to accommodate a user according to the way that they like to do business. And it is not, once again, it's not an all or nothing proposition. You're going to have some users that absolutely are on board with the push notifications and the mobile application on their device. You have other users just say, you know what, just send me a text and be done with it. And then you have some where they don't have much, access at all to a mobile phone. And we see that actually more often than I would have thought, in which case, they can do a voice authentication. So these are important considerations when you're looking at, this type of technology. And also the ease of integration. So because infrastructures are so diverse, there's a lot of things that 2FA impacts and MFA impact. So we talk about the firewalls, we talk about the VPNs, all of these different types of systems, things like Citrix, with NetScaler, among other things, which we proudly support. So the integration levels are going to become critical, especially as you either, have your existing infrastructure, or if you were to merge with another organization that has a different one, being able to have your MFA solution accommodate the most very different type of applications is going to be critical. And we're proud that we support many, but much more beyond this initial screen. So we're very excited about being able to present our technology to you folks. If there's any questions at the end, please don't hesitate to ask. But at the very least, I hope this was a good overview of the multi-factor authentication space and why it matters. Hopefully it garnered a sense of urgency to doing it in general. So with that, I think we can pass it over to Mike, Anil, or any questions, or we can take those at the end.
We'll take the questions at the end.
Okay.
So I think we can pass the controls to Mike. Let me do that. Mike, you should see some prompt. Okay.
All right, hey everybody, Mike Ujiro for SecurEnvoy. I believe everybody can see my screen. And okay, you can see my screen, correct?
Yes, I'm able to see a screen.
All right, good. Just wanted to make sure. All right, cool. Just wanted to make sure. All right, so what I'm going to do is give a quick demonstration of the product so that you guys can just kind of take a look at what we do, how we do. For the first thing I'm going to do is, for my first magic trick, I'm going to log into our management portal. And this is my Active Directory user account, my Active Directory password. And on the right-hand side over here, you're going to see a prompt. This is going to prompt my phone with a push notification. I'm going to accept that notification, and it's going to authorize me to access the environment. That is the exact same process that every single user is going to go through if you're using push notifications. It's quite honestly that simple. Now that I'm in the environment, I'm going to go ahead and walk through a little bit of the management interface, and we'll come back to do a couple more demonstrations. We have a Citrix NetScaler set up over here, and we want to make sure we show that to you guys as well. I want to walk through the console real quick with you. This is our dashboard, right? It's we designed this dashboard to try to be kind of the bird's eye high level view for an administrator to look at, so they can get an understanding of the status of the environment, what's kind of happening. So Over here, we can choose from the last 7, 14, and 30 days of detail, most notably for the user stats. So this portion up here at the top, right? We can see that we've got 125 successful logins, 63 failures, because we do demonstrate what it looks like when it fails. We've got some one-time codes that are being used, SMS messages, soft tokens that are being used, voice calls, and so on. Down here in the middle, you can see the last 10 events. It's important to take a note that the logs that we generate are in, relatively easy to understand phrases. So, right, push notification sent, push notification accepted, that type of thing, right? So it's not difficult to get through the logs. Over here on the right, we've got the status of all of our gateways. Our SMS gateway, voice over IP gateway, push services for Apple, Google, and Microsoft. And down here, we do have all of the 3 services that are running on the SecurEnvoy virtual security appliance, and our connectivity to the Active Directory 2 domain controllers on port 636 for secure LDAP. Down here at the bottom, we've got some stats that we show, the logins of the day, failures noted here, and actual authentications in blue. Now, when it comes to connecting to the Active Directory, it's important to know that this virtual security appliance is built on the Windows 2016 Server Core that's been hardened using the Microsoft guides and guidelines. This is a server that does not require a membership to the Active Directory, but we do connect to the Active Directory for lookups, right? So we have to do LDAP lookups for user accounts and things. We do use a service account for that, although the service account is a standard user, not an administrator. And we do, of course, connect over, obviously in this particular case, you can connect over SSL. That is a strong recommendation. It is not a requirement. For the configuration, as Doug was mentioning before, things are very much at the administrator's pleasure, right? So when you're engineering the solution or implementing it within your environment, the administrator of the system gets to choose what's available for the user community. So the more checkboxes I put, the more options and features are available for the users. Okay, so in this particular case, we're allowing push notification. We're waiting for 19 seconds to get an update from the user. You can extend that if you like. We're allowing NFC, QR code scanning. Laptops and PCs all have agents that are installed on them if you like. For SMS and email, of course, we do have a requirement for SMS and or email. For users or customers that are in an area where this mobile signal is not always a guarantee, we do preload, so I could send you the code you need next time now so that you have it with you when you go. This does not require the installation of our application on your mobile device. Same thing with 3 codes. I can send you 3 of them. So if you're going into the data center and you know that you don't have any signal in there, I can get you this. It's fully customizable, our solution. So you can customize the prompt that users read, and you can use your company name and so forth. We do voice authentication as well. This is not the voice authentication you might be thinking of. This is not like the movies, right? This is sort of a reverse token. So the way that this works is a user logs in, a 6-digit code is presented on screen for them, and then the phone that they're next to will ring. So that could be their mobile phone or their desk phone. They answer that, and they're given a prompt, and they enter the 6-digit code using the numeric keypad on the on the phone, and then they hang up and they hit login, and it sort of does the same kind of token in reverse. This is particularly good for areas and for user groups that have a restricted level of access. So, for example, a SCIF or a secure room. We see this now more common with legal customers, where they have a secure room to review documents. They're not allowed to bring any of their laptops or mobile devices or anything. All that needs to be left in a locker. Then they go into a room with a closed door, and they have basically a computer and a phone, and they log in and they can get access to the documents that they need. This prevents leaking of information or data getting stolen or whatever. As far as token goes, we do support the YubiKey. If you're not familiar with that, I would encourage you guys to look that up. YubiKey is a simple USB key that sticks into the side of your laptop or desktop PC When you authenticate, you'll be prompted to touch it to confirm that you're physically present, and then authentication will obviously continue. We do also provide the ability for the administrator to issue temp or static codes. We generally don't recommend static codes. In this case, we have them on for presentation. You can, of course, schedule the number of days. We can make this a very complicated login environment, right? So I can set this to, to this and say 6. So now what the user has to know is the username, the password, a 6-digit PIN, private identifier like a ATM PIN, and then a 6-digit passcode from the mobile device or push. So this is increasing the level of security exponentially. Mobile numbers that are used to register your mobile device with our system are always kept private by default. That avoids them getting pushed up into the global address list for exchange, and you don't want your mobile phone to get released to everyone at the office. That's fine. We can do that here. We can lock accounts out after X amount of bad login attempts. And we can disable authentication if there's been no user activity for a period of time, or if you've not completed the enrollment of your mobile device after you've been delivered the enrollment email. Locking out here does not lock out the Active Directory account, and there's a very specific reason for that I will get to here in a moment. We do have an emergency help desk. Lots of customers ask, what happens when I get out of the car, I drop my phone in the parking lot, the screen is shattered and I can't read anything. How do the touch screen isn't working, it's broken, I have to get a new one or bring it in for repair. What this does is it allows the user to sort of help themselves. By going to our emergency help desk portal, they can enter in their username, their password, answer 2 security questions, which I will also explain. And then once they are able to get authenticated using that method, then they are able to change their mobile password temporarily or assign themselves a temporary static code. This allows them to help themselves without necessarily needing to involve me. However, I do retain a lot of control here. For example, I can change this to a 3 for the maximum number of days that they can have a temporary phone number or code. I can also say down here that if you're only allowed to use this system once in every 365 days or once in every 9,000 days. So that way I can prevent users from using the help desk system that we've created to give a benefit to people, and they use it to provide a way to circumvent the system entirely. So this avoids that. So this is always something that we recommend customers do. You can also turn that off completely just by unchecking those 2 boxes, and then they don't have access to any kind of self-reset. We do also do group deployments. So if you have a large infrastructure, you got tens of thousands of users in your environment, you want to roll this out sort of slowly, you create a group in your Active Directory. We can monitor that group every so often. Anytime that we see anything that's new to that group, we go ahead and send out the invitation email. In this particular case, we're monitoring for this group in our lab, which is where the demonstration comes from. Logging is fairly simple, but we do push out to the Microsoft event log as well as any syslog server that you may have, right? So that's all standard stuff. We do have a REST API, so for those customers that are looking for customized development or they're doing an internal project, they want to include multi-factor authentication. The API that we use is fairly easy and straightforward. It's about 22 pages of knowledge that you guys will get. It comes with the product. There's no extra cost for that. And then your developers can, program right in to seamlessly integrate with our system. Email settings is fairly straightforward, right? So you just need to make sure that you've got an account, obviously with credentials. You can manage the external URLs for everything. So that way you don't have to worry about where do people go? What do they do? All of these are easily managed. Gateways are also easy to understand. We can restrict by country. So this is an example of one, right? This is web SMS. So this is a web subscription to a SMS-based company called AQL. And we have a whole lot of companies that you can subscribe to in the list. Credentials, and then of course I can restrict the country. So this is, the United States and Britain. You can add as many as you like. Voice works in a similar fashion, and then the push gateways for things like Google, Apple, and Microsoft. As far as Radius goes, this is a Radius product. We are the Radius provider. So as an example from the Citrix NetScaler, which you'll see here momentarily, Radius is going to come out of the NetScaler on the management port. We've given that a shared secret for authentication, and we've synchronized both ends, yeah? We're doing a two-step process, so the secondary form of authentication will be in a separate dialog. Not all 3 lines in the same form, right? You don't want to ever put all 3 lines in the same form. You want them to be on different pages. And then, of course, we can secure based on domain. Now, to answer the question from previous, why do we not lock out the Active Directory account when a user has failed their authentication? So if I'm outside the company and I'm banging away at a business that has a SecurEnvoy solution, I might know your username and I'll try your password 10 times, lock out the account, but I don't lock out the Active Directory. And here's why. Because a lot of organizations put in trusted networks. These are internal networks to the security appliance. So your internal users don't necessarily have to be burdened. You can release them of the 2FA requirement. So Jimmy in accounting could not be able to get in from a remote facility because he's trying to come into a NetScaler and use his Citrix environment, but he doesn't have his 2-factor with him, so he's not able to get through. When he comes to the office, however, and he logs in on his thin client, even if he's going through the same NetScaler, and even if this process and this policy still, the Radius policy for authentication still applies, if I take my Citrix environment and I am treating my internal and external users, all of them as if they're external, right? If I've done that, then what this will do is identify that he's internal to the business, internal to the virtual security appliance, and it allows him to pass with only username and password. It'll understand that and allow them to pass through. I can also set up blocked networks, right? So I can block any type of network that I don't want to have access to here as well. That's it for Radius. Under users, you can manage the user community and all the details around them. I'll show my account, for example. I am an enabled user. I'm permanent. I've got no failed logins. I'm a full administrator. That's my mobile number. It's private. I'm sending simple SMS texts. I'm using an Android device right down here, and I also have a registered YubiKey. So now as the administrator, right, if this was someone else's account, I can adjust any of these settings as I see necessary, and the user will then be imposed with those values. The log, as I said before, is fairly straightforward. You can see that there's a lot of logs that go on, most of which are giving demos and stuff. So you're going to see push notifications. You can see Active Directory accepting. Your push notification goes out and is received. This is all very easy to read and understand. You can clearly see who's logging in and how they're getting in, right? If the system is unavailable, we can enable emergency access so that they can use emergency access with a particular static code. So if there's a problem and there's an emergency or there's some kind of an event where data center is down or we're having all kinds of problems, a natural disaster or something happens, I can turn on secure ICE and give an emergency access to people. All right, so let me go ahead and log into the NetScaler Gateway so you guys can see that. So I'm going to go over here to the NetScaler Gateway. I'm going to bring my phone back up on the screen too so you can see me acknowledge. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and log in. I'm going to get a prompt over here on my phone. I'm going to accept that prompt, and I'm going to get shot right into my Citrix stuff, right? So there's my virtual desktops and my applications and all the other stuff, all the other stuff for Citrix. Now, the interesting part about this is that as you guys have been watching this entire video, as you guys are watching this entire presentation, the server is in Chicago, and I'm in London, and I am using my North American phone in Europe. So the way that the communication is happening, even though it's happening quickly, it's going back and forth quite a bit and using an international dial plan, right? So even with all of that complexity in place, we still get excellent performance. Distance is never a problem. These messages that we deliver to the user community are very small. The push notifications and things are very easy to work with. So I think that about wraps up for me. I think we've got about 8 minutes for any technical questions.
Right. Thanks very much, Mike. I think it was a fantastic demo. Great insight into what SecurEnvoy can do, and the various features and the logging features demonstrated. I think our audience really loved it. I think we have a couple of questions to take. So I see on your screen secure access is opened on a web browser. Could I know how easy is it to deploy on
Yep,
premise,
excellent question.
and is it
Yep,
also
that's an
available
excellent
as
question.
a cloud product?
Yep, those are a couple of excellent questions, and I can answer those for you. This is an on-premise product currently. We are currently building our cloud strategy and deployment model, which will be available towards the end of the year. We like the on-premise play quite a bit because we believe that the authentication between the security appliance, the security apparatus, right, and the Active Directory domain controller should be within the same switching framework if possible. The closer they are together, the less likely it is for you to have issues between the two. And it also removes the requirement for you to have to expose, synchronize, or load external third-party agents on your domain controller, right? This virtual appliance is currently sitting in the DMZ of our lab environment, which is directly behind our firewall. This is a virtual appliance that customers can download. We also have installable copies of our software, so you can build your own server and just download our software and install it right on any Windows 2008, 12, or 16 server. As we go forward throughout the year, we will be offering a cloud solution for customers. We're working through technical challenges with synchronization and the concerns that go around that. Particularly the way that those things are handled when they're received. We know it's a popular method to outsource this type of thing, but we are still pretty firm believers in the fact that having this type of process within your realm of control is an important function.
Right. That sounds really promising, Mike. And yeah, even though there's a lot of buzz about moving identity to the cloud, and a lot of identity providers kind of also providing this as a service right now as we speak, I think on-prem is still going to stick on for a while.
Yeah, I mean, clouds
And
are
the
just, clouds are difficult places to be, especially when they're multi-tenant and have tens of thousands of user accounts within them. They are an easy target. They are a high value target. The recent Equifax breach is one of the examples of the range of damage that can be done, right? 140 something million records, a lot of which contain significant personal identifiable information that is now being used to assist attackers with circumventing
Hey guys, are you able to hear me?
Well, we might have lost Mike enough.
Okay, no problem. So I think John or Doug, I think you could take the next question. So how can customers who would like to try out your software kind of get access to the trial? And also, how does the licensing work?
Yep, absolutely. So anybody who's interested in doing a trial, we have 30-day full-featured trials of a product up to 250 users, and we include 100 free SMS text messages with that. And you could just simply visit SecurEnvoy.com to get access. It's front and center, so it's very easy to gain access to a trial. We, of course, are available. Mike Ajero, myself, and John and the team are available to assist with any trials. But these are full featured, so you get everything included with that. So www.secureonvoy.com is the place to go for that. Our pricing model, it is per user per year. And so it's as simple as that. So we don't charge for any infrastructure. We don't charge for anything except the actual license for the software itself, which is on a per user per year basis, and is on a tiered pricing schedule depending on how many you are looking for.
Right. And what's the minimum configuration of a Windows machine required for, let's say, an organization which has about 1,000 users in their Active Directory?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a very lean infrastructure that SecurEnvoy can sit on. So there's two different configurations available right now. So it's a software itself, which you can install into your own environment, and that can either sit on a 2012 R2 or 2016 server with all the components associated with that. So the software itself, as far as storage goes, is negligible. So as long as you have a 2012 or 2016 server, you'll be good to go. And we, of course, have quick install guides as well to guide you through that process. We also have a virtual security appliance, which is a hardened version of SecurEnvoy. We've done most of the work for you. So the security appliance itself sits on a Windows 2016 core. And the reason we went with Windows is because we want it to be self-updating, we want it to be current, and we want administrators to feel comfortable with operating in an environment that they're probably comfortable in. So with the virtual security appliance, we've done pretty much most of the work for you. And then you still get the benefit, of course, of our software.
Great. That sounds really great. The couple of options to kind of install secure access in their environments. So final question in terms of this came up really early during the slide deck when you were explaining about data breaches. So one of our audience would like to know if there's a ratio between insider threat and outsider threat.
Actually, yes. So I think that if you can bear with me a second here. Let me just take a quick look. Yep. So 75% are perpetrated by outsiders. So when we talk about outsider threats, what we're saying is that anybody that's external to the organization. So these are the typical hacker profiles. And I believe, and you can look, this quote, this whole study is readily available online, the Verizon 2017 Data Breach Investigation Report. But I want to say that about 15% are inside. Right. And so that's bad actors inside. Those are individuals who are leaving laptops in cabs. They are disgruntled employees getting access to Excel spreadsheets and obviously getting into systems that they shouldn't, which of course has given rise to behavioral analytics within organizations to be able to determine is a person behaving in a way that they should be appropriate for their role.
Right. That sounds a little scary as well. But
it sure does.
Right. So we'll definitely, if feasible, let's share the link to this particular analysis report to the audience as well in our follow-up email. And
absolutely.
yeah. So, and that with that said, I think that's about the time we have for today. I see some of the attendees asking if the recording of this webinar would be shared. To answer the question, yes, we will share the recording to all the attendees and registrants for this webinar to your registered email addresses. And I also want to take a moment to thank John, Doug, and Mike for providing this fantastic presentation and great and sharing great insights with us in terms of identity and access management. And last but not the least, I want to thank everyone who made yourselves available for the webinar today. I hope you had a great time, and thank you for joining this webinar. This shall conclude our broadcast for today. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.